When was that accident?
Well, first of all, this is about the 29th of January
28th or 9th.
of 22. And we're celebrating our Christmas at some point tonight, and we're getting into these wonderful memories.
Yeah, Chris passed away recently.
And we're talking about my dad, Ross Otto Campbell. And my mother ended up always calling him Otto. And he ended up calling her Helen, even though she was Edna Helen, and he was Ross Otto. So they went by middle name.
And then you and Louise.
Well, then Louise wanted to change her name because she was Little Louise, and my mother was Big Louise, and she didn't want to be Little Louise.
She was Little Helen. And
that's right, Helen. Okay.
Yeah.
So she wanted to change it.
Little Helen, Big
she
Helen.
wanted to change her name to Louise Helen. And my parents said no. And then she waited till she was 40, and she did it legally. And so she is Louise Helen, and then it was Campbell, and it was Taylor, and it was Wyman. And she's kept the Wyman. She won't marry again. So then we were going back to my dad, who was a different dad to her because of his drinking. But he had gotten in a terrible car accident in Sarnia on the way back from my great-grandfather's funeral in London, Ontario. And Mom and Louise and I had gone up there for the funeral. I don't remember if he took us. He might have, and he had to come back and go to work. And then he was coming to pick us up, and it was a 2-lane highway, and the car coming at him, it had 3 passengers in it, and they ran into my dad, and all 3 of them were killed.
Wow.
And my dad was never the same again. He had a 56 Chevy, and the middle of the steering wheel had a point.
Oh, yeah.
It came out to a point, it went right in his chest. And there was nobody else coming along the road for some time, but the first man who did come pulled over, and he saw that the other people were already gone, and he came to my dad, and he prayed with, he was a minister, and he prayed with my dad. And from that point on, my dad changed his ways.
I bet he did.
So he was taken to a hospital in Sarnia, and we took the train, my mom and sister and I, from London to Sarnia, and they allowed me to go up and see him. And I remember seeing him to this day with glass on all of his hair.
Wow. How old would you have been about this time?
That was 50. It was February 25th of 1950. I think it's 55.
Or 56?
56. It was 56.
56? Because I think it was a 55
So
Chevy.
I was 8 at that time.
It's 55 Chevy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was 8 at that time. It was a 55, not 56.
I think it was unless he had just bought a brand new car.
Well, I don't know what they had purchased. But he was out of commission for a long time, and he was never the same again. So when I was being raised, and there's 7 years difference between Louise and I, but she was still going to the beer garden with him because he wanted her to keep him company at the corner of our street in 7 Mile. And I don't remember any of this. And that never happened to me. He never, thought of it. I never even knew he drank. I don't remember seeing beer in the house. So it's really like we had 2 different fathers in many ways.
Wow.
And he had a cute sense of humor. I mean, it's not that he made you laugh, but he would do nice things. For example, we'd be walking along the street and he'd toss a nickel or something on the cement in front of it. So it'd be like I found a nickel. And that was a big deal, back then.
Yeah.
So he would do what he could. He was understanding. He was supportive. He drove me to take my private organ lessons. When I was taking piano, I had to take a bus there. That probably was during the time after his accident. Took the bus with my sister, and we would take our piano lessons. But by the time I was taking private organ, then he would drive me there. And we didn't even have a car for a long time because they couldn't afford it. Mom was working for Chrysler at that time, but she got a ride with some other person who was working there and picked her up. And then my sister had to get a job at a grocery store when she was a pretty early teen, maybe 13 or 14, 14 probably. She got a job at a grocery store that was close to a mile from home. She had to walk there, of course, and walk home. and she would get paid, and she would pick up any of the extras that they never had. They didn't have jam if she didn't buy it. They didn't have any kind of sweet treat if she didn't buy it. So it was all very, very good. I never felt like we were poor or without. I didn't know it. Maybe I was oblivious to all this stuff, or maybe I was just too young.
Well, it could have been a different time because of the age difference from when Louise was your age versus when you're there. 7 years has gone by and they've figured stuff out, maybe.
Well, it might have, yes.
You know?
Yes, it might have changed. My parents always dressed well. They bought good clothes, not top of the line clothes, but they bought nice clothes. They looked good. My mother got her hair done every week.
Yeah.
And my dad made sure that things were in its place. And they were where they were supposed to be. And my mother kept that kind of a home too. There's a place for everything and everything in its place. And then it would be time for winter to come, and he would get everything winterized. And then he'd come back in the house and he'd say, "There, now we're ready for winter." And I felt so safe with him because he would always provide for what was coming ahead of time.
Yeah.
And that made me feel very safe.
Now, you guys lived on Shields?
We lived on Shields from the time I was 8 months old.
Okay.
Before that, they were in an apartment off of Jefferson.
Oh.
It might have been on Benetoff. My dad shipped out for World War II when my sister was really little. She was born in 40. And I'm not sure exactly when he shipped out. It might have been 46 or 45. Actually, I was born in 47. He probably shipped out in 44. So she could have been, I don't know what month he was shipped out, but like she could have been 4 when he left. And they lived in this apartment, and my mom worked for Hudson Motor Company during that time. Mm. And she saved the money. She was able to save money. So when my dad was discharged, she had, I think it was like $1,000 saved, which was a lot of money back then. It would be probably today close to $40,000 or something. And she was able to they were able to come up with a down payment for a brand new house.
Wasn't there like a GI housing?
A bill?
Yeah.
It sounds familiar, but I don't remember them telling me anything about that. But the neighborhood that they bought in was a neighborhood of brand new homes, really designed for veterans who were returning back home.
And was this Shields then?
Yes.
What was the address of that?
19381.
Shields. And then you had a friend who lived down the street, right?
Right. Nancy and David Hintz, Hintz.
Nancy and Dave Hintz. Okay.
Yep. And there was a Darlene Bouguet, I think it was, who lived in another block. And there was a Susan Doherty who lived maybe 4 or 5 houses from us. And my dad and her mother had gone to the same school, elementary school in Detroit.
Oh, wow.
But they never got together.
Yeah.
Is that why he named you Dorothy?
He always called me Dorothy.
He did.
He never called me Dorothy. He called me Dorothy. I didn't remember that until I was in my first office building, and I went in that in 97. And the man across the hall from me was not born in America, so he had some other tongue that he had learned. And then he called me Dorothy, and I realized that's what my dad used to call me.
Oh.
I remember Grandpa going, Dan, Don, Dave, Dorothy, Hugh.
He'd go through the whole list.
The D's, because there was a bunch of D's in our family, and he could never get the right name.
Yeah, it's cute.